This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. A warning. This segment contains discussion of sexual assault and drug use. This week, we're connecting the dots between unsealed documents, empires, and pop stars. I know. How are all these things connected? Well, we're going to find out with Megan Cuniff, legal affairs reporter, and Sydney Madden, reporter for NPR Music and co-host of Louder Than a Riot. Megan, Sydney, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thanks, Brittany.
Hi, how's it going?
Good to have you both. Very good to have you both. So if you haven't guessed, today we are talking about Sean Diddy Combs. First, I want to know, what was your reaction to his recent indictment?
My first emotional reaction is, wow, this has been a long time coming, and it's also just the beginning.
Megan, what was your initial reaction?
I thought that the indictment really reflected everything we've seen in the lawsuits over the last few months. And it was almost surprising how much the indictment reflected the lawsuits.
I mean, I wasn't surprised at the indictment. I was surprised at the dramatic fashion with which it was unsealed. But for those who don't know, the rapper Sean Combs, aka Diddy, was indicted on charges of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, racketeering conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He was arrested and arraigned earlier this week, where he pleaded not guilty. He was denied bail after prosecutors argued nothing would ensure he wouldn't leave the country or hurt people if released. And this indictment, it's 14 pages long, and all of the charges that are detailed are quite harrowing. First, I want to know, what stood out to you in reading the indictment? Sydney, let's start with you.
So these 3 counts that he's being indicted on are very serious. It really highlights in detail alleged illegal activities of these day-long sex parties that he would orchestrate, or sexual performances that he would call them freak-offs, where he would force victims to have sex with sex workers for days on end for his own gratification. And according to allegations in the indictment, he would film them. In order to keep people going, he would feed them drugs and IV packs. He would coerce them in order to continue these acts. And it really just speaks to an overall system that he orchestrated to do this, allegedly. And the way it comes down to being a criminal enterprise was especially shocking to me, because the indictment details, allegedly, how much leadership, control, and direction he gave so many people around him in order to have these sex parties happen, booking the hotel rooms, supplying the drugs, procuring and soliciting sex workers.
What stood out to you, Megan?
How prepared his attorneys have been and how much work his attorneys have been doing on the front end pre-indictment. When you just look at the lawyers that he has, and then the filings that they've done, the package that they've already put together, and then they included some correspondence between themselves and U.S. attorneys going back months that really shows they basically saw this coming, and they've been trying to build trust to try to get him some kind of bail package. But anybody who's covered these cases over the years, especially sex trafficking cases in the Southern District of New York, the idea that he wasn't going to get indicted and then that he wasn't going to get held without bail, I think was always far-fetched.
How is this different from the high-profile cases that have come before it, like Harvey Weinstein or R. Kelly? Megan, let's start with you.
I'm not sure there are any huge differences other than just different court. That's a big one, is that Harvey Weinstein was charged in Manhattan criminal court. He didn't face federal charges in anything, whereas this is the federal court in Southern District of New York. And they have experience prosecuting sex trafficking crimes through, of course, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and then a cult leader.
Keith Raniere,
Yes, exactly. That Diddy's current lawyer represents. I mean, this has obviously been a long time coming just in the public realm.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about this week is how Diddy represents kind of both fame and power, whereas someone like Harvey Weinstein had a lot of power in Hollywood, but not the same level of visibility as someone like Diddy,
Right.
or someone like an R. Kelly or a Bill Cosby, for example, had a lot of visibility, but not quite like this industry-wide Titan level of power.
Yeah.
And Diddy kind of combines both of those. How is this different from other high-profile cases culturally?
Exactly as you're saying. Compared to R. Kelly and Harvey Weinstein and other people who've been brought up on these charges, he is not someone who is a celebrity of legacy or yesteryear. He is not a behind-the-scenes kingmaker. Diddy is very present in the pop culture sphere, in the hip-hop sphere. This time last year in September, he was getting the key to the city of New York. Like, let's think about that. 2 years ago, he was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award from the BET Awards. He was nominated at this year's Grammy Awards in the R&B category, and he's been able to keep himself very relevant and afloat even as he maybe has not been at the forefront of making music by his connections with people like Carisha Brownlee, aka Young Miami. His 50th birthday party was covered by Vanity Fair and Vogue, and it was extremely star-studded. This is a man who not only built himself up as the persona of hip-hop's bad boy, but also hip-hop's biggest success story. And he was kind of in the midst of, I don't know, like enjoying that victory lap before all this news broke last November.
You referenced last November. Of course, you're talking about the suit that Cassie Ventura brought against Diddy that was settled already. In the past, Diddy has apologized for his physical assault of the singer Cassie, which at least one occasion was caught on video. But this week, Diddy pled not guilty to what was in the indictment, and his legal team released this statement to the Times. Sean Diddy Combs is a music icon, self-made entrepreneur, loving family man, and proven philanthropist who has spent the last 30 years building an empire, adoring his children, and working to uplift the Black community. He is an imperfect person, but he is not a criminal. There's no debate, I think, that Diddy built an empire. But how was Diddy able to build this empire and to allegedly abuse his power with impunity?
Listen, the Lock song, Money, Power, Respect, it's a Bad Boy Records release. It really is true in the music industry, especially in the corner of the music industry of the hip-hop industry. And for example, when I read through Don's suit.
Yes, to update listeners, Dawn Richard is a singer who met Diddy through his reality competition show, Making the Band. She brought another lawsuit alleging sexual assault, battery, and unpaid wages, and that was filed literally last week.
Yeah, exactly. According to Don's suit, he punched Cassie so hard in the stomach she doubled over and she had to be ushered out. And Jimmy Iovine, Neo, Usher were all in attendance, allegedly. According to Don's suit, Dawn also said in her suit that she was told by Diddy, I can make you disappear. Like, this is the level of pressure that a lot of people around him, especially artists, allegedly was subjected to or was witnessing at all times. Like, that's how you build the pathology of this pressure, of this abuse of power. But that being said, like, all it takes for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing, right? Like, so I think the question really is, who in those rooms was big enough to check this man? The man who made himself so big that he was uncheckable. Because that's what I'm saying. Like, Diddy made himself the top dog in any room he entered. And he let everybody know that they were always operating for him or under him in so many ways, allegedly. And in those moments, what were they willing to lose in order to check him?
I mean, according to the indictment, there are accusations that he used employees to literally hide the people he abused or even tried to bribe hotel staff to not say anything.
Yes.
When you have that kind of money, it is possible to operate at a certain level that to the average person, it would seem like some Corleone type of Godfather type of measures.
Yeah.
But as you both have remarked, Diddy's been in legal trouble for a while now. There is this indictment and multiple lawsuits over the past year. So what does this arrest and indictment mean for him? Megan, let's start with you.
I think this is going to put a screeching halt to all the lawsuits. It's standard that any of these civil cases aren't going to be resolved until after his criminal case is resolved now. Civil cases are are civil cases where you're fighting over money. And no matter how serious the allegations are, the harm to him is always reputational or financial. Whereas criminal case, I mean, he's looking at the loss of his liberty. He's already lost his liberty right now. Some people are surprised. People are wondering if it's a strategic blunder for them to be going for a bail appeal so soon.
Right. His lawyers appealed the bail decision literally the day after it was denied, and they got denied again. Ultimately, does this mean anything for the music industry or rap specifically? A lot of people have been wondering about whether or not the music industry would have its own quote-unquote Me Too moment for a long time. It's hard to predict the future, but do you think that this case will change anything? Sydney, I'd love to hear from you.
The fact that we can name so many figures in the hip-hop industry or the Black entertainment space, people like R. Kelly, Russell Simmons, L.A. Reid, who have had allegations like this brought against them before.
Some of them deny these allegations, but yes.
It shows you how pervasive and insidious and also normal the problem is in this world, right? It's a running problem that has been long normalized and downplayed. So these are the open secrets we're talking about, because an industry that runs on work and play, it runs on escapism, fantasy, pleasure, like a lot of facets of the entertainment space. It's most of times made in the benefit and the advancement and advantage of hetero men and to the detriment and disposability of women. Now, all that being said, Diddy is like one of the biggest people. He is a planet in all of this. You know, that's why he was able to bring so many people in his orbit. So him being the big fish, could it be the thing? Could he be the one that sinks the ship of misogyny and sexism and violence in hip-hop? Maybe. But what I think would be a more telling indicator is how many people in the wake of all these allegations start to distance themselves, start to condemn his actions, and honestly, like, relinquish some of their power even to do so.
Well, we will see where the chips fall. As you said earlier in this conversation, I do not think that this is in any way the end. I think this is just the beginning, and we will see how all of this shakes out. But Megan, Sydney, I have learned so much here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you so much.
That was Megan Cuniff, legal affairs reporter, and Sydney Madden, reporter for NPR Music and co-host of Louder Than a Riot. You can find Sydney's work at npr.org, and you can find Megan's work at her Substack, Legal Affairs and Trials with Megan Cuniff. I'm going to take a quick break, and when I get back, I play a little game of But Did You Know with a couple of my wonderful producers. Stick around.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Saatva. Founder and CEO Ron Rudson shares why Saatva sales associates are focused on finding the perfect mattress for their customers.
At Saatva, we have a 365-day home trial. Why would we want to rush you or try to push you into something that's not right for you? We want to make sure that we guide you to the right mattress. Our team is always available to be helpful, to make sure you make the right choice.
To learn more, go to SAATVA.com/NPR.
This message comes from Schwab. With Schwab Investing Themes, it's easy to invest in ideas you believe in, like online music and videos, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and more. Schwab's research uncovers emerging trends, then their technology curates relevant stocks into over 40 themes to choose from. Schwab Investing Themes is not intended to be investment advice or a recommendation of any stock or investment strategy. Visit schwab.com/thematic investing. This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. It's good to share helpful knowledge, so here's a tip that could be doubly helpful. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means you could turn $150 cash back to $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
All right. I'm Brittany Luce, here with my fantastic colleagues, Barton Girdwood, senior producer, and Corey Antonio Rose, assistant producer. And we're going to play a little game I like to call, But Did You Know? Are you familiar with it? Have y'all heard of it?
Something like that.
I think I made it up.
Well, you both already know how it works because you work here. But for those who don't know, here are the rules. I'm going to share a story that's been making headlines this week. And as I give you some background on the story, I'll also ask you trivia related to it. But don't worry, it's all multiple choice. And the first one to blurt out the right answer gets a point. Person with the most points wins, and their prize is bragging rights. Are y'all ready?
As I'll ever be.
I'm so ready to take Corey Antonio down.
Oh,
we went from colleagues to enemies. It is time.
I love it. So this week was the Mid-Autumn Festival, a yearly harvest festival celebrated across East Asia. It's characterized by the lighting of lanterns and the popular mooncakes, popular and delicious, that celebrants give to one another. But we're going to get a little deeper into the festival by learning more about its central legend. To start, in China, the festival is based around a moon goddess named Chang'e. It's a love story between her and her husband, Ho Yi. So this guy was a really great archer. What heroic feat of archery is he known for? Is it A, piercing the night sky to create holes, which are the stars? B, shooting 9 out of 10 total suns out of the sky? Or C, piercing the heart of an enemy from 10 miles away?
I'm going to go with A.
I'll go B.
The answer is B. According to the legend, all those suns were drying out the earth and killing people, which makes sense. So he shot most of them and left one sun for light and warmth.
Oh, consider it.
I would love to know this. So you all live in a warmer climate than I do. Both of y'all are based in the Bay Area. Do you like the heat? Could you do 10 suns?
You know, I grew up in Florida, so I feel like I have felt the warmth of 3 to 5 suns. I don't know if I could do 10. Definitely, I feel like I could do at least 2.5 suns to 5.
Corey Antonio can take the heat. What about you, Barton?
I'm just obsessed that you think that the Bay Area is warm. We out here in hoodies every day.
Okay, fair. We are recording this actually at an 83-degree day in New York City. So
Oh, no, it's more like a 65-degree day here.
Oh, no. Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe I need to do 10 suns because I cannot deal with 65 as the hottest that something's going to get. That's not for me. All right, well, question number 2. As a reward for shooting down 9 out of 10 suns out of the sky, the heavenly Queen Mother gave Ho Yi an elixir of immortality. What did he do with it? A, drink it immediately. B, split it with his wife. Or C, not drink it.
He didn't drink it.
I agree. C, he didn't drink it.
Well, both of you were right, but Barton was first. The answer is C, not drink it.
Woo!
So Ho Yi was worried that drinking the elixir of immortality would separate him from his wife. So he gave it to Chang'e for safekeeping. A wife guy through and through. To recap the score, Corey Antonio, you are sitting pretty at 0 points. And Barton, you are at 2 points. And you know what? To spice things up, I'm going to make this one winner takes all.
Wonderful.
I hate when you do this.
I know you hate when I do it, and I don't care because this is for the stakes. So question 3, the final question. So this guy, Ho Yi, becomes famous for shooting all these suns, right? And he gets all these people wanting to be his apprentice. One of his apprentices is a guy called Peng Meng. He's a greedy guy, though. He just wants the elixir. He sneaks in while Ho Yi is away, and Chang'e catches him. What happens next? A, Peng Meng kills Chang'e. B, Chang'e drinks the elixir herself before he can get to it. Or C, in fighting over it, the elixir gets spilled and no one drinks it.
C.
I'm going to say B. She drinks it herself.
Wow, Corey Antonio coming in to clinch it for the final win. Oh my gosh, the answer is B. Chang'e drinks the elixir herself.
She was a real diva. You got to put yourself in a diva mindset. What would you do? You got to save your marriage and save immortality.
Oh my gosh. Corey Antonio, you're mine. You were in the diva mindset because that was not what I guessed, actually. But yeah, so she drinks the elixir. Then she floats into the sky, lands on the moon, and becomes the moon goddess. When Ho Yi, her husband, though, came back, he was like, oh my gosh, what went on in here? And he was really sad. His wife became the moon. So he sat out some of her favorite fruits and cakes outside to show her that he missed her. So that's a very abridged version of how the festival was born. Part of the tradition is now partaking in the kinds of treats that Chang'e liked. So if you floated up to the moon and you became the moon goddess, what snacks would people set out for you? I already know my answer. I've had time to think about it, admittedly, but...
Go for it.
Okay, I said the crinkle cut chips that they have at Trader Joe's.
Okay.
Draft root beer, a small vanilla cone from Dairy Queen.
I'm seeing the spread. I think for me, it would be like a nice plate of a chicken Caesar salad, French fries,
Yes.
extra seasoning, rosé.
Oh.
You know, leave me a bottle, don't do a glass.
Don't be cheap.
Don't be cheap. And then a red velvet cake slice to top it off.
I love that. I love that. Okay. What about you, Barton?
An iced coffee.
No disrespect. I'm going to go with Corey Antonio's meal in this situation. All right. That is it for But Did You Know for this week. Congratulations to Corey Antonio on your win.
I'd like to thank the Academy.
Well, Barton, Corey Antonio, thank you both so much for joining me today. And really every day if you think about it.
Thank you for having us.
Can I go back to work now?
If you must. That was Barton Girdwood, senior producer, and Corey Antonio Rose, assistant producer for this show. I'm going to take a quick break, and when I get back, we're digging deep into the hurt of rejection with author Tony Tallada Moody. Stick around.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Betterment, the automated investing and savings app. CEO Sarah Levy shares why they provide tools and technology for retail investors, small businesses, and independent investment advisors.
At Betterment, there is one unifying idea, which is the idea of expanding access. Historically, great financial advice was reserved for the wealthy, and what technology has done is basically lowered the barrier to entry and created an on-ramp for people earlier in their financial journey to get access to great advice. The same is true for small businesses, where mid and small-sized businesses have not historically been able to afford a retirement solution for their employees. So again, Betterment's technology allows smaller and smaller companies to attract the best employees. And then lastly, for financial advisors, what we've done again is expanded access by automating and using the scale that technology can provide.
Learn more at Betterment.com. Investing involves risk. Performance not guaranteed.
This message comes from Apollo. In the ever-changing financial landscape, what worked yesterday might not work today, and today's solutions might not meet tomorrow's needs. That's why at Apollo, they constantly challenge assumptions to craft forward-thinking answers, from custom capital solutions to retirement planning and fixed income replacement. At Apollo, they think it through, then they think it new.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch. Support for NPR and the following message come from Amazon Business. Everyone could use more time. Amazon Business offers smart business buying solutions so you can spend more time growing your business and less time doing the admin. Learn more at amazonbusiness.com.
About 10 or 11 years ago, I went on a date with this guy, but I remembered that the date went pretty well. He was nice looking and had interesting things to say, and we had a lot in common. And not to toot my own horn, but I was a reliably great date back then. I knew how to be good company. My jokes were landing, and we were laughing together, and he was complimenting my hair. We didn't have that immediate spark I got with some guys that I had been out with, but truthfully, that spark hadn't done me much good up to that point. So what did it really even matter? This guy seemed stable and emotionally healthy. That's like a needle in a haystack. We ended the night with the usual pleasantries and a nice long hug. On the train ride home, I texted my friends that a second date was in the bag. And yet, the next morning when I got the requisite "thanks for a great night" text, this guy had tacked on a sentence that I wasn't used to seeing. He said, "I really enjoyed our date, but I'm looking for something different right now." He was rejecting me. Now, I've been ghosted before, I've been cheated on, but that stuff happened down the line. This guy really couldn't stand to sit across from me for another 2 hours. That rejection stung. I was annoyed, but I moved on. And a year or so later, I ran into that guy and his now wife at a Halloween party I attended with my now husband. And one of those rare, neat twists of fate, everything worked out. But what if I hadn't moved on? What if that was the straw that broke the camel's back? The thing that had me screaming, crying, throwing up, and posting vague quotes about healing on Instagram for months on end. The thing that launched a shame spiral I never got out of. Rejection is something the author Tony Tallada Moody wanted to explore when he started thinking of his newest book.
As a writer, you're facing these all the time. The last time I checked my sort of spreadsheet of submissions, I think at that point I'd racked up somewhere around 400 of them with maybe 3 or 4 acceptances or something like that.
With thoughts of rejection swirling in his head, Tony wrote a totally wild ride of a book called Rejection. It's a collection of linked stories, and in it, Tony introduces you to characters who are obsessed with their rejections and just can't let them go.
Every other book that's out there about rejection is about, advice to deal with it. Somebody at my publisher called the book not so much a book of self-help, but self-harm. I thought that was pretty appropriate.
But why can't some people let go of rejection? And why does rejection sometimes feel like a blow to our sense of self? Today on the show, Tony Tallada Moody walks us through the social power and extreme pitfalls of rejection. And you better stick around, because even if you haven't been rejected recently, it is sure coming up in our culture. Tony Tallada Moody, welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thank you.
My pleasure, my pleasure, my pleasure. I don't think that you can really have rejection, or at least you can't really sit in rejection without grievance. And earlier this year on this show, NPR music editor Stephen Thompson said that 2024 is the year of grievance. In politics, in music, it's in the air. Like the tack that former President Donald Trump is taking with his 2024 presidential campaign. Kendrick Lamar and Drake, Beyonce deciding that she's going to make this whole country album because she wasn't accepted at the Country Music Awards. And then she didn't even get nominated for any Country Music Awards in 2024 for her actual country album. A lot of these grievances are kind of born of rejection. I wonder, why do you think we as a culture are so mired in rejection right now? And do you think we even want to get out of it?
I think we all want to get out of it. And I think that, there's a sort of larger thing that all these things share in common, which is the sense of helplessness, right? When you have a problem that you feel like you can't do anything about directly, the sort of consolation prize is to have your pain acknowledged and validated. And with a problem like rejection, it's very unlikely anything you do is going to really change that. And it's probably ill-advised for you to try to change it. What you get is, well, at least acknowledge that, I'm right to feel this way, that I'm right to feel bad. So I think that in the same way that a lot of political grievance comes from the feeling of not being able to affect any change politically, on an individual level, or somebody even as powerful as Beyonce not being able to be, acknowledged for the work that she's doing, this gets expressed as grievance.
We see with a lot of these really powerful people that their grievance can really power some big things. But I wonder, is there actual cultural power in being rejected?
Well, I think that it's one way of garnering sympathy from other people, right? If other people share the same grievance as you, then they're going to want to help you or fight on your behalf, if not at least commiserate with you, right? And that, as a political tool, can be very powerful.
Okay, now let's get into this book. There is a lot of rejection in your book, and your characters don't just wallow in their grievance. They get dark. But I also noticed that there is a pattern to the way that each of them handles rejection. Like once a character experiences rejection, real or imagined, they don't just spiral into disappointment or depression. They really seem to cling to the shame of their rejection. But there is also something about that felt a little familiar. I think many of us know what it feels like to be in a shame spiral. It seems like rejection can really mess with our sense of self-preservation.
I would go a little further and even say that it messes with our sense of self, period, right? You know how sometimes you'll send an email out and then as soon as you hit the send button, you notice like 1,000 typos and a bunch of things that you wish you hadn't said just at the moment when you can't unsend it.
Right. Like after you've already proofread it like a couple of times and you're like, this looks normal. And then as soon as you send it, it's like, I hate you. And it's like, I don't remember typing that.
The reason that happens is because like, as soon as it's out there, there's some switch that goes on in your head where you immediately have to look at the email through somebody else's eyes, hypothetically, right? I almost think that rejection kind of works the same way in that as soon as, you put yourself out there, you're rejected, you're immediately prompted to wonder what it is the other person saw in you that made them reject you. And very seldom do you get a really straight answer about that. The rejection, might have almost nothing to do with you and everything to do with circumstance or mood. But nonetheless, you are sort of forced to see all the typos in yourself, and you might be right or wrong, but either way, you're kind of intensely wallowing. So it's sort of a really difficult trap to get out of.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways too, rejection, it makes you look at yourself from an angle or an imagined vantage point that you're not really supposed to look at yourself from.
Right. It's a purely hypothetical one.
Yeah, purely hypothetical one. It can have you like on a fool's errand of going and looking for things wrong with yourself. But sometimes people, like the characters in your book, also seem to want to avoid that self-reflection at all costs and focus on the rejecter. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that if you're like healthy, well-adjusted, mature, considerate, you can take a rejection and use it to sort of inform your idea of yourself and change things that are bad about yourself and try to improve. For the rest of us, I think that there is this heavy distortion that comes from your ego, right? Your ego wants to protect itself against this perceived attack from somebody finding you unworthy in some way. And that's why I feel like you get all these sort of disproportionate responses to what are even very mild rejections, right? You very often see people react to it in a way that's like, well, you must hate me then, right? They go to this extreme hyperbolic place because your ego demands it of them, where it's just like, I'm a decent enough person. So the only thing that could really justify this rejection is, concentrated, targeted hatred at me specifically. And that's just, a really simplified example. But I really do think that it is the sort of ego that makes this whole process go haywire. Otherwise, you would just take a rejection and it would just be feedback, right?
That's a really good point. I mean, I also just want to point out just how great you are at writing cringe. There were so many scenes where I was squirming in my chair, and there were parts where I had to put the book down for a second because I was like, oh my God, this is like a one-way train headed to mess, which is the stuff of great drama. There were so many just gut-twistingly uncomfortable situations that the characters not just found themselves in, but sometimes put themselves in or created. There's also just so little hope in this book. Not to say that it needs it at all. I think it works perfectly fine this way. But I think a lot of times when people think about rejection, or if you get rejected, then someone who loves you is going to, tell you, it'll get better, or you got it next time. But there's none of that reflexive shoulder padding in this book.
Yeah. Well, you touch on a really important thing about the book, which is that I wanted to try as hard as possible to avoid any sort of false optimistic narrative about just keep at it. Because, when you're rejected, that's kind of what you hear from everybody, right? Everybody wants you to sort of let go and move on. And that is generally the healthy thing. But I think that there's also a value in just actually recognizing and affirming the pain of rejection, which is something that's very isolating and solitary and is sort of in that way, again, the opposite of self-help, right? A large part of that is where the cringe comes from. It's that you're just sort of stuck in this thing that's uncomfortable and you can't get pulled out, right? You don't get that sort of relief. Maybe get the sort of relief of comedy, but it's definitely not a message of hope that I was trying to sort of embody with the book.
That's a really good point. Cringe is kind of just the result of having to sit and stew in these crappy circumstances or extremely uncomfortable circumstances without any type of relief. I'm going to change the subject a bit and talk about a theme I picked up on in your book, how rejection and identity interact. I found that the characters also hope to find safety through their identity. Like Allison, a character in the second story, she finds safety in her identity of being a white girl with a lot of friends of color who are in a group chat that she doesn't really ever meet up with in real life, but they can sort of be the Greek chorus to her own life story and help her make her feel like she's making the right decisions depending on the information she shares with them and how. And when those fantasies about their identities or those hopes about their identities turn out to be inaccurate, the characters crumble. Why is identity so tied up in safety and also in rejection?
Yeah, I think that it's because it's something that is bigger than yourself, right? When you have found yourself, inadequate or you've failed, identity is something outside that seems to be more stable, that you can latch onto and use to protect yourself and define yourself. And of course, identity is extremely malleable and shifting and unreliable. Sometimes the importance or the role that identity plays in your life is something you badly misjudge. And, that's a mistake that a lot of these characters make too.
So many of the situations in these stories, and even one specific story, reads like an AITA post, which, for those who don't know, the public radio version of the acronym is Am I the Jerk? These forums are really popular on Reddit where people ask that exact question. And very much like an AITA post, you stay close to a character's viewpoint, but through context clues, readers can see through the way that other people interact with them exactly where this character is going wrong, exactly where they're shooting themselves in the foot. They're popular on Reddit, but they go viral on Twitter or on TikTok or Instagram. What is it about these stories, these AITI stories, that we love so much? And why did you think it was important to include one in your book?
Well, I think that there's kind of two genres of those sort of posts, right? One is, I guess, what you could call a good faith post, where somebody is like, help me try to understand this situation and who's to fault here. And, if I am wrong, I'm going to take accountability for that and try to grow and change as a person, right? And then there's the kind that I'm interested in, the extremely bad faith type of post where really, the ulterior motive is give me ammunition for why I'm right. Help me affirm my own sense of my rightness so it can sort of shove this post in the face of the person I'm disagreeing with, right? You can feel the person putting their thumb on the scale in the way that they're describing a situation and not doing it very well, right? It's always very transparent when they're sort of trying to bias the story of what happened by narrating it unreliably, right? So I think that from the reader's perspective, the thrill is of this kind of dramatic irony, right? Where something and are learning something about this character that they don't seem to know about themselves. And the more extreme and sociopathic these confessions end up being, almost the more dramatically pleasurable it is to read.
That's such a good point. I think also too, we all kind of like the momentary victory that can come from either like being the Judge Judy in the situation, like reading these stories and deciding how you would how you would judge them. We all kind of get to play act at our grievances and play God and decide who's good and who's bad.
Yeah. I mean, that comes at a cost, right? Because on the one hand, you get this sort of smug feeling of moral superiority for, just kind of being like, oh, look at this jerk. Look at how they're sort of tripping over themselves for validation or whatever. But then as you refine this sort of critical, condemning gaze of yours, you then turn it upon yourself later on.
And the results, in my experience, haven't been great. I don't know if that's ever going to stop me from reading those and wanting to play Judge Judy. But as you mentioned, it's kind of a losing game. Well, Tony, I really, really squirmed, but I enjoyed reading your book and I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
That was author Tony Talatamudi. His novel, Rejection, is available now. Next Tuesday, I repeat, next Tuesday, in this podcast feed, I am headed to Miami, Florida. We're continuing to drop into cities across the country for the Smackdown, a debate over what are the most influential things and people from American cities. Which, I ask you, how much do you know about Miami? Tune into the Miami Smackdown next Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Barton Girdwood,
Alexis Williams,
Liam McBain,
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Jessica Plachek.
Engineering support came from
Ted Mebane,
Josephine Neonai.
Our executive producer is
Jasmine Romero.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Apollo. In the ever-changing financial landscape, what worked yesterday might not work today, and today's solutions might not meet tomorrow's needs. That's why at Apollo, they constantly challenge assumptions to craft forward-thinking answers, from custom capital solutions to retirement planning and fixed income replacement. At Apollo, they think it through, then they think it new. This message comes from NPR sponsor Vuori, a new perspective on performance apparel. Check out the latest Dream Knit collection by visiting vuori.com/NPR for 20% off your first purchase. Exclusions apply. Visit the website for full terms and conditions.